Hello, everyone. My name is Pooja Rao, and I'm a postdoc at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I work in the aerospace department, and today we are very glad to have all of you here today. Um, so we'll be talking about, we have two speakers today. The first speaker would be Stephen Wood, and he would be talking about writing personal statements and tailoring CVs according to whatever jobs you apply. And the second speaker is Dr. Caroline Szymeczek, and she would be talking about writing grants, etc. So there would be two talks. Each talk would be about 20 to 25 minutes length. And at the end of each talk, there would be about 5 minutes allotted for questions. You can put your questions in the live feed on YouTube. And at the end of the talk, I'll pick those questions and then I'll ask the speakers those questions. And the total webinar time is about an hour. And now shortly we'll be starting with our first talk, which is about writing personal statement and CVs. Our first speaker is Dr. Stephen Wood. He's a computational scientist at University of Tennessee at Knoxville. He specializes in designing efficient and robust numerical software for engineering applications. And these softwares are run on cutting edge computer architectures. So I open the floor to Dr. Stephen Wood.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Pooja, and welcome to all the participants out there on the web. I'd like to jump right into the presentation and leave plenty of time for interaction and questions. So to begin, our curriculum vitae. This is our course of life. This is our opportunity to introduce the relevant portions of our experience to potential employers and colleagues who we hope to collaborate and work with or be paid by. So we wanted this to be complete, but to the point for a particular job or for a particular field that we're interested in. So that we accurately and honestly cover our past and put that in chronological order so it's comprehensible. And we want to talk about the skills that we already have and the proficiencies, experiences that we have accumulated along the way as we built those skills. This is to demonstrate that for a job, for a particular field, we have the necessary skill sets and complementary skill sets that will allow us to perform that job, the duties, responsibilities, in a way that contributes to the team effort. And it's important here that we realize that this is beyond just presenting a list of what we've done and what we can do. We actually need to make this interesting. We need to grab people's attentions. It's a bit of a marketing task that we have here. And it's not a resume, which is much more targeted list of skills and achievements. The CV is really as full a record that is relevant that you're presenting to a potential employer or collaborator. Our personal statement is an excellent opportunity to introduce ourselves. Oftentimes in digital formats, a recruiter or a hiring manager may only look at what is displayed on their screen when they open up your Word document or PDF of your CV. And so that might be as little as the top quarter of the page. That might be all they have time to look at because they could have hundreds of CVs waiting to look through. You want to make this top quarter of your CV impactful and make them interested to read what comes below. With a personal statement, who are you? What can you do? What are your ambitions? Those are the questions that you need to answer, and answer them in a way that makes them want to read more. And this is also an opportunity to show that you have an idea of what the field is in need of, what your particular employer is in need of, and what strengths you have that can meet those needs. This is a time to be as specific as possible within that 50 to 100 words. If you have facts, you need to put them there. I created this that had X impact, and these are the people who benefited. That's the type of statement you want here, not just, I'm really awesome. Here's a quick checklist. It's a busy slide, but I wanted to put this all in one place so that later for reference, you can just look at this list of 10 items that I think are really important to have in mind as you go through creating your CV and updating your CV throughout your career. One of the things I've encountered quite a bit working with interns is the oversale. And there's a Jamaican saying that if you make your sail too big, your boat will turn over. And I want to highlight that you're presenting your CV to employers and collaborators who likely have much more experience in the field than you do. They'll be able to ask specific yet subtle questions that reveal in something as simple as your use of keywords or jargon, whether you really know what you're talking about or not. And they might not make a big fuss about it, but you probably just won't get a call back. So be humble, be honest, and be to the point. Include your contact details and make sure it's a professional email. Don't use your personal email when you're sending out to an employer if it's anything very cutesy. Try to use your school email or create a brand new email that is just to the point for use in correspondence with employers and collaborators. In your employment history, and this is a point I'll come back to a little bit later in the presentation, you want to highlight your skills and strengths and the responsibilities you had along the way. Education and qualifications, highlight your publications, if applicable, but certainly skills, knowledge, and accrued, and achievements. With any other experience, that's works, clubs, volunteering, presentations, if you think it's relevant, include it and put it in chronological order along with your employment history and education. Make sure your references are available at least upon request, and make sure you've reached out to the people that you would like to vouch for you in advance. This is an opportunity to expand your network and maybe even get pointers for where to direct your resume. If you're really lucky, they might even ask for a copy of your resume so that they can send it out for you. And unless you're applying for a job as a copy editor or a graphic designer, keep your formatting of your CV as simple as possible. And throughout, you want to use active language and avoid repetition. Now, this is because you've done these things that you're writing down in your CV. You might make it clear that you did this, that it didn't just happen to you or happen to somebody else. So stick to the first person and be assertive. Use headings and bullet points to separate out the sections and make things easily digestible to the eyes. Check your spelling. That's a quick way that resumes are screened out in automated systems. Sometimes hiring managers, a real person, might not even look at your resume if there's spelling errors or grammar errors. Like to shift now to the happy situation where you've identified a job that you want and you're going after it. You want to research not just that job, but the whole organization. What's their mission statement? What are they doing in the news? What is available about their strategic plans? All of that information will be really helpful in cultivating the set of relevant experiences you want to really emphasize and highlight. And it's also great preparation for an interview if you're fortunate enough to make it to that stage of the hiring process. If it's a public institution or their human resources makes their process visible to you, you want to find out what it is that distinguishes the performance levels for the position that you're applying for. This could be something as simple as at the basic level, you follow directions. At the mid-level, you start to lead. At the top level, you're evaluating, reviewing, and delegating. You know, that's simple. Distinction between how you fit into the team. If you can show that you have those experiences and highlight them, that can really show that you're paying attention to how this organization works and are interested in fitting in and engaging with them. Your cover letter and personal statement. Again, we want to be active and we want to show that we are ready to work with that organization. And consider the fact that people are busy. They might only skim your cover letter, they might only skim your CV. So make sure you get their attention in the first paragraph and with your personal statement. If you happen to be printing this out, group it all together and include information about how the hiring manager can get in touch with your references, whether they need to contact you and ask for them, or your referees are comfortable with you sharing their contact information. If it's electronic, PDF, I think, is a very stable and portable way to go. I think for a simple CV, there probably isn't any need for the newer versions of Microsoft Word, the doc with an X at the end. Just an old, very compatible .doc file will do. And I also want to point out that as things get more and more electronic and more web-based, almost all of the applications I've put forth in the past 2 years, I've wound up having to enter all my data into that HR organization's form. So how fancily I formatted it and how neat it was didn't really make that much of a difference because they just got a raw text information into their electronic form. And if you're going to put this out on the web because you want to advertise for collaborators or for headhunters, make sure it's just your electronic contact information. Please do not include in any form, whether it's in print, through a form that you fill in, or on the web, your date of birth, your place of birth, marital status, birth certificate, or any other identifying object documents, your bank information, your middle name, because unfortunately, job postings are a great way to steal people's identities and to harness your personally identifiable information for less than honest endeavors. So be very careful about how completely you identify yourself. You're already providing a lot of information in your CV. Don't make it any easier for social engineering attacks to impersonate you. I've found that there are many sources of good inspiration for what to include in your CV, and even in this process of trying to prepare my CV, it helped me to hone my goals for my career. Looking at mentors, either my personal mentors or people I looked up to in aerospace and high performance computing and engineering, professors I really admired, looking at their CVs and also at job postings helped me really understand what are the topics that are hot right now? What are the directions that the industry is going? Where am I interested in going? And then also reading articles in trade journals to see what are people talking about? What are the concerns that are arising right now? And that also gave me some research ideas. So I think preparing and maintaining your CV as well as your career direction and actually doing your job all work together very nicely when you really pay attention. So now I'd like to try to invite you guys to interact a little bit. I went to USA Jobs and kind of looked for something at a postdoc level. And I found this research physical scientist / hydrologist. And I pulled out a couple of phrases from the summary and responsibility sections here. On the next slide, I've written a personal statement. And I really would like to invite all of you, or as many of you who are interested, to read this through and think about how we can improve the statement on the next page. So here's the statement, and I will go back and remind you some of the key phrases from the summary and responsibilities. We're hired to supplement a lead scientist research on problems of national priority. We needed to use imagery to compare model output with ground truth data. We need to refine algorithms to reliably estimate different properties, and the focus of this position will be on vine and orchard crops. You need to collaborate with agronomists, viticulturists, develop and refine models, evaluate methods, incorporate model output. So I'm interested to hear your feedback on this personal statement and what you think is good, bad, could be improved about it.
At this point, I would suggest if anyone, whatever question Stephen asked for, if you have an answer, whatever you think about the research statement, just put it in the live feed at YouTube so he could see it. He could see your response.
Pooja, can you send me the YouTube link?
Sure, I can.
Thank you. While I'm waiting, I want to go ahead and point out, I hope I'm not talking over points that anybody else has already made on the YouTube link. This is not a terrible personal statement. It says hydrology is a research area vital to our sustainable future. Okay, that's true. You're showing that you know a little bit of something about the field, but the hiring manager already probably knows that. So you've used up a whole line of text without saying anything about yourself. I think you could probably do better with that amount of visual space. Research in this area requires multidisciplinary collaboration, which I enjoy. Okay, now you've provided a little bit of information about yourself, but you're at the very end of the sentence. It's not that active. My deep interests include modeling row crop water flows, makes me a great candidate for this job. Okay, now you're starting to say that you've paid attention to what this job requires and that you have interests in that field. I think that is really the only thing that I would keep. That sentiment is really the only thing I would keep. I enjoy this, I'm interested in it. And from there, I think there's a lot that can be rephrased and pulled out of the summary and responsibilities. Pooja, I haven't received the email yet. The YouTube link.
Did send out the link on the chat, but I will send it to you.
Yeah, thanks. Since I'm full screened, I'm not seeing the chat.
Okay. I think it's on Google Hangout. I can resend it to you over the email.
Let's see if I can find it. Oh, while I'm waiting, I'll come back to that. I want to make sure I leave Carolyn plenty of time. Here's a brief template for your employment history entries. You want to make sure that you clearly identify where you worked, what you did, when you were there. And remember, you did this. You need to convey use language that conveys that you made this happen. And for each of the accomplishments, whether it's the summary statement or within a specific task or project or duty, here is not so much how, but why, what was the outcome, and who benefited. This then makes it clear that you have an impact where you go, and that's really, I think, what makes it possible. Let's see. And now, thank you very much, Pooja. I've got the YouTube link, and I say, see, I agree, Marianne, we should start with an action statement. Xinglan, extensive experiences, I like that. And I think those are both really very good suggestions. Thank you for participating. And now I want to kind of take a second to say, let's zoom out and remember that much like our research and everyday tasks, this is a big challenge. And I found preparing my CV and writing cover letters and personal statements to take quite a lot of work and several iterations, and getting feedback from colleagues and even family members was very, very helpful. So I encourage you guys to engage with people professionally, especially your career services resources. If you are in school, the career services, even if they don't have a career service specialist for your major, at least very talented professional proofreaders and editors. They'll catch the things that might get you flagged in the automated systems and avoid a real human being getting your CV. So don't miss that opportunity. Then zooming out even further, what are we looking for? What do we really want to achieve with our CV? Yes, we'd like to get that job, but what is it about that job or that career field? Is it a passion? Is it your mission, your profession, your vocation? Are we, on a sustainable path? Is this really the step that we want to take? And from the World Economic Forum, there's this very nice article. The link is there on the slide on the bottom left. A concept, Ikigai, I think is probably a terrible pronunciation of it, but I like this Venn diagram quite a bit. And this is one of many different visualizations and discussions of what does it take to kind of feel like you're successful and doing what it is that you're meant to do. And it's something that I hope all of you will find in your life, and I hope that your professional career arc is part of finding that. With that, I want to wrap up before I go too long and ask Pooja to take back over.
All right, thank you, Stephen. That was a really nice talk. So there's a few questions that were being asked, and the first question is how long the CV should be. So some places specify the length of the CV, how many pages, but some places don't. So what is a good rule of thumb in that case?
Great question. I'll refer to USA Jobs. They recommend less than 6 pages, including your references. So I think if it gets longer than that, either you're extremely senior or maybe you're providing some information that isn't the most relevant. And I'd also say that as you become more experienced in your field, the jobs that you get later on, so the more recent entries on your resume or on your CV, actually contain skills that encapsulate your prior positions. So if you can say, oh, I was a technical manager, and before that I was a technical lead, you might not need to include, I was a junior technical understudy. Leave those first two, and they'll see that you've been in the field for 15 years already, and imagine that you climbed the rungs pretty successfully to get there. And so that can be a good way to keep it shorter if you find that you need to trim something off your CV.
Okay. So the next question is, should one be writing about their employment history before the educational background?
That's also a really nice question. And I think that depends on if you're applying for a very targeted position, and you feel that your work history emphasizes and encapsulates your education, make sure that's on the top quarter of the first page. If you feel like this is a general resume, then I would go with the more standard personal statement at the top, and then educational history following, and then work history. But I think that, again, depends on whether you are targeted or more writing a more general CV.
I see. So the next question is, I think, more of a suggestion, where someone's saying replace deep interest with extensive experiences. Right. So I think they're suggesting that.
I think that was related to the improving the personal statement.
Okay. I see.
Were there any other questions?
So I have a question. So regarding the things that should or should not be mentioned on a CV. So let's say if someone's a student, a foreign student or a foreign worker, and they have, the job that they are applying to, they might not be sure, what kind of visa requirements are required for that job. So should one be mentioning something about the status of their visa on the CV?
I think if there's a question about the requirements for the job, that I would reach out to the HR department or to the contact listed on the job posting. I don't personally have a lot of experience with visa status, but I would be reluctant to include that on the CV.
Hey, well, thank you so much.
You're very welcome, and I would welcome comments from the participants on that topic. I think that's a great question, Pooja. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So if any of you have any questions and you didn't get a chance to ask Stephen, please put them in the chat and we can forward them to Stephen, or one of us can answer it maybe later on. The next speaker would be, so we'll be following the same format as we did for the first talk. The next speaker is a woman of many talents, Dr. Caroline Szymeczek. She has a PhD in cell and molecular physiology from UNC Chapel Hill. She is an experienced educator, and she's involved in integrative coaching for young professionals, especially in STEM fields. She has special interest and area of expertise is diversity and working with young professionals. And I open the floor to Caroline, who would be talking about writing grants.
Hi, this is Caroline. Can you hear me?
Can.
Yes, great. Let me get my PowerPoint up here. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is writing a fellowship, and specifically writing a personal statement for a fellowship. I'm giving you my name on this slide, and also if you'd like a copy of these slides or would like to contact me after the fact to ask me any questions, feel free to do so. My email address is here. And I'm going to offer throughout this presentation some websites you might want to visit, and some resources. It'll probably be easier for you just to get a copy of my slides after the fact than to try to take notes. So I'm happy to provide them to you if you would like them. Or perhaps the organizers of this event could also figure out a way to share the slides with you, and we can discuss that later on. Anyway, what I'm going to do today is a real whirlwind tour of talking about fellowships, and specifically writing a personal statement for fellowships. My purpose here is really just to give you a really quick preview. And my goal is really to encourage you just to start thinking about writing a personal statement, thinking about writing a fellowship, and to encourage you to start asking questions and asking me questions and asking your research advisor questions about writing a fellowship. Okay? So before we even kind of delve into this topic more, a question that pops up all the time is writing a fellowship really all that important? Well, if you can answer yes to any of the following questions: do you want to do a postdoc? Do you want to work in academia? Do you want to work in industry? Do you want to work in government? Do you want to work? Do you aspire to a career where you're going to exercise your creativity? Would you like to be considered a thought leader? Do you want to improve your skill at critically reviewing the literature? Do you want to be better at analytical thinking? Do you want to learn how to write a persuasive argument? Would you like to extract every bit of learning you can out of your current position? Would you like to embark on what might be the singularly most valuable experience of your academic life so far? Well, if you've answered yes to any of those questions, then the answer to this question, is writing a fellowship really all that important, is yes. So with that out of the way, if I've convinced you, I hope I have. If I haven't, you really need to talk to your research advisor, your mentor, your colleagues about this. But if you're convinced, how do you get started writing a fellowship, writing a personal statement? So the first thing, or maybe not the first thing, but one of the first things you need to do is you actually need to find a fellowship or a grant opportunity to write for. And I've listed just a couple here. These are really common ones. These are very competitive, and they're very well-received, well-recognized opportunities that you might want to pursue. So the first is to look at NIH, and the NIH publishes what they call funding opportunity announcements, or FOAs. You'll sometimes hear them referred to. And I'm not going to go into detail here because we have such a quick amount of time, but I have provided you a really nice link, and if you click there, you can find what is available currently for pre-docs and postdocs, and that page will send you to the appropriate FOA. Another place where you should look is the National Science Foundation, and they have what are called solicitations, okay? Different funding agencies refer to their calls for fellowships with different names. So for graduate students, I encourage you to check out the Graduate Research Fellowship page, which is abbreviated GRFP, and I've provided you that link. For other folks, you might want to pursue getting a fellowship from a foundation, and there are many. I'm just providing you one example that I do know many graduate students in particular have used, but this is also available for postdocs and for people who need dissertation funding, and that is the Ford Foundation, and I've provided you that link here. So again, you don't need to copy these links down. I can just make these slides available to you, and then you'll have them. So other resources for finding a fellowship. I cannot emphasize enough that your advisor is really the place where you need to go early and often when you are writing a fellowship, because they can direct you to the most appropriate resources for your field, your level of expertise, and what you're trying to achieve with the fellowship. But their input throughout the process is going to be vital, so you might as well contact them right at the get-go and talk to them about that. They can also give you advice about the timing of of when it is that you should be writing a fellowship. Okay, so all that is very field and advisor dependent. I encourage you to do that. You can also talk to your mentor, your mentors, director of graduate training in your department, office of postdoc services if you're a postdoc, and if your institution has such an office, and also the office of research services at your institution. Those are all places that should be able to help you find, and in some cases even help you to work on your fellowship. So that's my quick introduction to finding a fellowship. But while you're figuring out what kind of fellowships are a good fit, there's some other things that you can start doing right now, okay? So, and why do you want to get started right now? Because I'm sure you're very excited about doing this. Okay, so what can you do right now? You can start collecting and reading successful fellowship applications. You can do this right now. You can click on this link I've provided and spend the rest of your Friday night reading successful fellowship applications, okay? There are probably plenty of places online. I've just given you a link to one resource at the University of North Carolina that I'm familiar with that lists a lot of examples, okay? You can also ask your advisor if she or he has copies of successful fellowship applications. And in some cases, institutions archive those. So that's one thing you can start doing. The other thing you can start doing is start thinking about what you're going to propose for your research plan, because that's one key part of the narrative you're going to write and submit for your fellowship, okay? And that's something that you can do and should be doing with your research advisor. They are an instrumental part of your research. They're helping you to guide, they're helping to guide your research, and they should be there to talk with you about thinking about your research plan. So that's the second thing you can do. The third thing you can do is you can actually start working on your personal statement for your fellowship. Now, this is different than what Dr. Wood was talking about previously, which was a personal statement that appears on your CV. This is the personal statement that is actually part of your fellowship narrative. And it is generally, this is dependent on what fellowship you're writing, specifically what goes in that personal statement. But this is generally much more extensive than the personal statement that appears on your CV, okay? So I'm going to spend the rest of this, what I call a whirlwind tour, talking about how you would actually start writing a personal statement for your fellowship. Now, a caveat before I get started here is that depending on what fellowship you're writing for, there are going to be some different rules, some different guidelines, some different things you need to consider in your personal statement. So what I'm going to provide you today is just a general overview of what generally goes into a personal statement. But you need to always, always, always be sure that you are meeting the requirements of the particular fellowship that you're applying for. So let me talk a little bit about writing a personal statement for your fellowship. There are a couple of things that are going to be of high importance. So these 4 bulleted points are what we are going to talk about next. So the first thing about personal statements that I want to convey to you is what you must convey in your personal statement, okay? So here's an example of what you most likely will need to convey. And again, this depends on what the fellowship opportunity is, but this is a pretty good general statement that you're going to have to somehow convince people of in your narrative. And that is that you have what it takes to become an engaged knowledge expert and leader who can contribute significantly to research, education, and innovations in your field, okay? That is pretty daunting, but that's what you need to do to write a very compelling personal statement and research plan as well, okay? So that's what somehow you're going to have to figure out how to write. So what else do you need to consider? There are a couple of overarching considerations regardless of what kind of fellowship you write. So the first thing is that in the fellowship you write, you will almost always be provided with some kind of general instruction statement or it's often referred to as a prompt, okay? And that is going to be the overarching point that you need to address. And an example prompt, this is actually one that the National Science Foundation uses for their GRFPs, is please outline your educational and professional development plans and career goals. How do you envision graduate school preparing you for a career that allows you to contribute to expanding scientific understanding as well as broadly benefit society? Okay, so this is an example of what the NSF, for example, expects you to cover in your personal statement. A lot of words there. So that's one thing you've got to always keep in mind is what is the prompt? What is the big picture that they want you to address? Overarching consideration that I'm going to just throw out here for you very quickly is that any fellowship that you write for will have in their instructions and listed in the solicitation or the FOA specific review criteria. They will actually tell you how they are going to review your personal statement, what will be considered an excellent or fundable personal statement. So you need to make sure that you know what those review criteria are. In the case of, whoops, I jumped the gun. In the case of the National Science Foundation, for example, they specify that the two main review criteria are intellectual merit. So you need to show that your ideas and you yourself are worthy of intellectual merit. And you need to show broader impacts, or that your research and your ideas will have broader societal impacts. Now, those are just two examples of review criteria. And again, you'll need to get that specifically from the fellowship that you are writing for. Okay, so those are two overarching considerations. So you might be sitting here at this point saying, okay, I kind of get it, but how do I just like jump in and get started? So I'm going to give you a quickie guide to what you can do if you're sitting there with your computer screen in front of you and your hands on the keyboard and you have no idea how to start putting together something that addresses the prompt and addresses the review criteria that you have been given. Okay, so what's the first thing? First thing, and I can't emphasize this enough, is whatever guidelines are provided to you in the funding opportunity, funding announcement opportunity, or the solicitation, or the website for the fellowship, or any other materials that the fellowship has and provides you, you need to read those guidelines. And then you need to read them again. And then you need to commit them to memory. And then you need to read them again. Because one of the, it seems silly to say it, but a lot of times people just don't follow the guidelines, and that will get your fellowship and your personal statement thrown out pretty quickly. You need to demonstrate that you're following the instructions and that you have understood exactly what you're supposed to do. Okay, so that's the first thing you need to do. The next thing you need to do, and I highly recommend this, this is a useful exercise for you no matter what you're doing. It will help you actually in writing your CV. It'll help you in writing your personal statement. It'll help you if you're asked to write a biographical sketch. It'll help you if in your graduate training you're asked to write an individual development plan. It will help you just to clarify who you are, where you're going, why you're doing what you're doing, and what's important to you. So I highly recommend you do this next exercise, which is to set up a brainstorming worksheet. So when I say set up a brainstorming worksheet, I mean physically set up a brainstorming worksheet. Open a file on your computer, a blank file, or get out a piece of paper and a pen, however you prefer to work, and answer these following questions in a paragraph form. So the first question is, why are you fascinated by your research area? You need to practice articulating that. Write a paragraph. Nobody has to see this right now. This is your own personal brainstorming worksheet, but write it down, okay? The next question, what examples of leadership skills and unique characteristics do you bring to your chosen field? Okay, it's kind of, it feels like you're bragging a little bit, but you need to learn how to showcase your talents and highlight what you're good at. So go ahead, write it down. Think of what makes you unique and what your leadership skills are. The third question, what personal and individual strengths do you have that will make you a qualified applicant? Okay, go ahead, think about it, write it down. It doesn't even have to be in a paragraph form. If the best way that you can do it is to make a bulleted list, just make a bulleted list, okay? Just get started putting something down on paper that helps you to understand the kinds of things that you're going to have to put into your personal statement. Next question, how will receiving the fellowship contribute to your career goals? Nobody wants to give you a fellowship if it's not really going to advance your research, so you need to be able to articulate that question. And finally, what are all of your applicable experiences? Just make a list. What kind of things have happened to you from birth onwards that are relevant to what you want to do in your research career, in your training experience, and when you get the job, okay? So that's the first thing I ask you to do, set up your brainstorming worksheet, okay? Okay, this is the next one. I want you also to set up a key experiences worksheet. This could be a separate file or just an extension of that first file that you've set up. So I want you on this one to write about a couple of experiences, okay? These are things that have happened to you that were significant, that were unique, that had an impact on you. And they need to be experiences that motivated your research career, that are related to your educational and professional development goals, that have particular meaning to you personally and or scientifically, and are unique and interesting. Now, this is a hard one. A lot of people say to me when I recommend this is, oh, nothing interesting has ever happened to me. But it's not true. What you need to do is, if you can't think of any key experiences, you just need to sit down and talk to colleagues, talk to your advisor, talk to your parents, talk to your cousins, talk to people who know you, and see if they can help you to dredge up some of these unique things. You know, it might be something that they remember from a conversation you've had with them years before. What are the experiences you've had that have made you into the young scientist you are today, and that are driving you to become a more experienced scientist and to accomplish things in the research world? These things are going to be really key to making an interesting and compelling personal statement. Okay, the next worksheet, I'm telling you, you've got to be serious about this. So this is the third worksheet you have. You need to set up a plans and goals worksheet. You may have already done this, actually, if you've written an individual development plan, okay? If you've not written an individual development plan, this is a great place to start. So what I want you to do on this worksheet is to start listing your educational plans, your professional development plans. And by that, I mean, you know, what are you trying to develop professionally? Are you going to attend workshops? Are you going to apply for an internship? What are you doing to further your professional development, and why? And what are your career goals? And then I'd ask you to turn that list into a paragraph. And then again, add details to your paragraph that make your plans and goals uniquely relevant to you, okay? If this worksheet is one that you feel would be applicable to 20 other people, then I think you're not really delving deeply enough, okay? You want your plans and goals to be things that are directly relevant to what you want to achieve, and what you want to achieve is not and should not be the same as what everybody else in your graduate program wants to achieve, okay? It's important that you are able to distinguish that for yourself and also for people who are potentially going to be reviewing your personal statement. So you've got your 3 worksheets, your key experiences, your plans and goals, and I want you then to build a single document, to combine the information on the first 2 sheets, to play around with the order, to highlight what you have so far with section headings, so really make it nice and organized and give it section headings, start formatting it so that it makes sense. And then I need you to decide how you're going to introduce the document in a way that conveys you particularly uniquely, and then how you're going to end the document. Often you can refer back to your interesting introduction to make the story come full circle, because you're really telling a story, okay, with your personal statement. So once you've got that single document that you've compiled using all your worksheets and all of your thinking that you've put into your worksheets, you need to evaluate and revise. You need to make sure that you conveyed that big picture, that you have what it takes. You need to make sure you addressed any prompt that you were given. You need to make sure that all the review criteria and required elements that you're supposed to include have been addressed. Go back and reread your instructions. Make sure that you've got everything in there. And then finally, this is something that a lot of people don't consider, but you need to make sure your statement is what I call adequately sweetened. What do I mean by that? I mean, you've got a compelling introduction. You've got an ending that doesn't trail off. You don't have anything in there that is cringeworthy. And by cringeworthy, I mean, oh, you haven't said anything like, I was the first in my class and that made me become the scientist that I am today, or something that just doesn't come across well, okay? You need to make sure your statement is organized and labeled, that there's a discussion of your academic and your research interests. It's got to tell a story. It's got to have relevant information, a good level of detail, needs to address your audience and address the prompt. And if you can go through this list and say, yes, my statement does all of those things, then you've got a pretty nice, sweet statement, okay? So finally, and again, I told you this was a whirlwind. I apologize I've spoken so quickly. But finally, in terms of your personal statement anyway, the next question you've got to say is, who's going to read my first draft? Because revising and reading and getting a lot of input on this statement is just vitally important, okay? So don't forget that part. And again, don't forget to circle back to your research advisor, because they're going to be able to give you really valuable input on this draft. Now don't forget, I've just been talking about your personal statement. You still have to write your research plan, okay? So that's a topic for another day. We don't really have time to talk about that as well today. So with that, I'd like to be sure to thank you for participating, and I am happy to field any questions. So Pooja, if you can take over and figure out a way to get me any questions, I'll be more than happy to field them now.
Thanks, Caroline. I think Pooja actually logged off the call by mistake, so I'm happy to take any questions. If viewers have any questions, go ahead and put them in the live chat on the YouTube channel, and I will ask Caroline for you. Well, nothing has come in yet, Caroline, so if any of the viewers have any further questions, then I guess they have your contact information from that first slide. So they will reach out to you personally.
That is awesome. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak. It's been really fun.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you both, Caroline and Stephen. And thanks to our viewers for watching this whole webinar. If you haven't seen already, I went ahead and posted a feedback form link in the chat. So if you would be so kind to take 5 minutes and just provide us some feedback on this webinar to help improve the experience for our next time, we would really appreciate that. Looks like we got a question from Jinlin. Can you send the slides to all registered users? So Caroline, we actually had about 40 people register for the webinar. Would you mind if I send you their email addresses and you can send out the slides to everybody there?
Whatever works, that's fine.
Okay, great. We'll play it safe and just be sure that everybody gets it if they want it.
Sure.
All right, well, we're going to go ahead and stop this broadcast. Thanks again to everybody, and thanks to Caroline and Stephen for giving such a lovely presentation. We hope to see you at our next webinar, which should be in January. Thank you.